Well, okay, we are still in Nehemiah, and today, I'll just tell you up front, we're going to do 2 chapters of Nehemiah. No! 2. But we got work to do. We got a wall to build. So this is where we come in. If you haven't been with us up to this point, in Nehemiah starts off with the problem. And the problem is the fact that even though people have come out of the captivity of Persia, and they've gone back into Judah, into the land where they're supposed to be, and they've built the temple, and that's all done. That was the book of Ezra. Still, there's destruction in Jerusalem because of Nebuchadnezzar knocked down the temple. He also knocked down all the gates into the city, burned them because there's wood on them, and he also knocked down the walls, leaving the city completely defenseless. And so now when you come into Nehemiah, we are 140 years after Nebuchadnezzar has come in and knocked it all down. So for 140 years, Jerusalem has been completely open to thieves and to marauding bands of people. I mean, warmongering and all this kind of stuff. I mean, they've just been defenseless. If you're in the ancient world and you don't have walls and you don't have gates in order to control good and bad people coming into your town, you're defenseless. It's been defenseless for 140 years. That's the problem at the beginning of Nehemiah. So I show this picture right here because it's just like at your house. I go through this ritual every night where I lock all the doors. And why do you do that? Well, because while you're sleeping, you can't confront the people who are sneaking into your house. But what if you left a gigantic hole in the side of the wall into your living room? And you locked all the doors. Would that work? No, it wouldn't work because you got to have the walls working too. So here's the twofold problem as we come in. For a structure to work like this house, you have to have the door intact and you have to have the stone walls intact. We're just speaking Captain Obvious things here. That's how you provide security. And that's the problem going into Nehemiah. So today we're going to make a good start in terms of fixing that problem. Okay? So here we go. When we started Nehemiah, we found out that Nehemiah wrote this book because in verse 1 it says the words of Nehemiah. Okay, the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah, we're recapping here. And in verse 3, there was a report that came back. They said to Nehemiah, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile, that is, Persia back to Judah, is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates are destroyed by fire. So that's the security problem, right? And you got to realize too, their wall was stone walls. And these stone walls have been knocked down by Nebuchadnezzar. Now likely when Nebuchadnezzar wanted to make the city vulnerable, instead of taking down the stone walls and carting the stones away, he just basically pushed them over. Because during this particular time, the walls weren't cemented together. You just took incredibly heavy rocks and you stacked them up until you made a wall, and you couldn't get past those. It was hard to push them over, but he pushed them all over. So at this point, the walls of Jerusalem, you can tell where they're supposed to be because all the stones have been just spread out in a big flat area. So it'd be nice if someone would stack those up, but it's not quite as easy as it sounds. So anyway, here's the problem that comes to Nehemiah. It looks like this. Everything is torn apart. And so he prays, and in the end of his prayer, he says, "O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man." Well, we looked at this prayer last week, and this is the closing words of his prayer. And we said, what does that last part mean? Grant him mercy in the sight of this man. And in fact, when he does his prayer, he doesn't even ask anything specifically about the gates and the wall. But he does say this thing at the end. So what I said last time was, we're going to check out and find out what this is all about. And why is it today something immediate is going to happen that he asks God's influence for. And then he says in verse 11 right after that, I was a cupbearer to the king. I'm the guy who tests the king's wine to make sure it's not poisoned. I'm a cupbearer to the king. Maybe he's talking about the king of Persia, the king of Persia. So he's still back in Persia. He's not in Judah. He's back in Persia. So chapter 2, verse 1, in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine and I gave it to the king, and that's where we left it last time. And today we're going to find out what he does with the king. What's he going to ask? What's he going to ask, knowing that the entirety of Jerusalem is completely open and vulnerable to any marauding hordes that come through? What's he going to ask? Is he going to ask the king to fix it? We'll find out today. So here we go. Now, I had not been sad in his presence. What? Okay, just read more. If you read something in the Bible and it confuses you, just keep reading. Yeah, it'll kind of clarify itself. Because here's what happens. He comes to the king, and the king says, so why is your face sad? Why is your face sad, seeing you're not sick? This is nothing but sadness of the heart. Well, Nehemiah is very much afraid at this point. Because, I mean, you're a servant to the king. You're an import from another nation. Your people have been enslaved to them for a long time, about 70 to 80 years. Why do you just say, well, O king, be presumptuously, will you do this for me? You don't do that. Kings are the ones who make requests. You don't. But now the king is opening the door. You look sad. In fact, it looks like your heart is sad. So tell me what's going on. This is a very compassionate king, really, Artaxerxes. So verse 3 says, well, let the king live forever. That's how you always start. That's the respectful start. So if you ever find yourself in front of a king and the king makes a request of you, you start with, O king, live forever. Okay, so anyway, here's what I'm going to ask. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Why wouldn't I be sad? So the king said to me, well, so what are you requesting? He hasn't requested anything yet. So what are you requesting? What do you want from me? And so I prayed to the God of heaven. Now that's an interesting little intrusion right there. So the king asks him, what are you asking of me? And at this point, it seems like Nehemiah doesn't know yet. He doesn't know what to ask for. Does he ask for Artaxerxes to rebuild the whole city of Jerusalem? No, you can't do that. That's crazy. What are you supposed to ask? If you've ever been in a situation where this happens, have you done this? Have you stopped just briefly and quietly said, God, what do I say? I do that all the time. I do that all the time. And you probably should too. If you get to a point where you don't know what to say, and you genuinely don't know what to say, I always say, God, give me some words. And this is exactly what Nehemiah does right here. I think that's really cool. Because even in Nehemiah's previous prayer we looked at last week, he doesn't know what to pray to God. He's not sure what his role in all of this is. All he knows is that his heart is broken about the fact that his hometown, Jerusalem, for 140 years has been vulnerable and everything knocked down. He doesn't know what to ask for. He doesn't know what his role in it is. And the king's now asking him, tell me what you want. Let's be specific. He prays, and this is the answer he gets on the spot as he prays. And I said to the king, okay, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. How are you going to do that? It took Nebuchadnezzar's army to knock down all the walls and burn all the gates. So he's just asking, well, I think my role is, king, O king, if it pleases you, send me back to Judah, and I'll rebuild it. It's really kind of an audacious claim. He's not asking much. And then for a split second he thinks, okay, let's see how this goes. So the king says to me, and the queen sitting beside him, by the way. It says that in the passage. I think that's kind of nice. So the king said, but the queen was sitting beside him. So she's going. So the queen's sitting beside him. So here's what the king asks. How long will you be gone, and when will you return? Just kind of cool. He's basically saying, I'll let you go back to Judah if you go in to rebuild Jerusalem, but when are you coming back? You're still going to be my servant, right? Or are you leaving permanently, right? Well, so then Nehemiah says, it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. So he gave him a time, and the king said, okay. Now, Nehemiah doesn't tell us how long right here, but we can count it up as we read the rest of Nehemiah. But he gives him a time. He makes him a promise. I will come back. I will come back. So I said to the king, if it pleases the king, here's a couple other things. Let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river. The province beyond the river is the name for Judah. It's all that. They just called it from the Persian perspective. It's that province beyond the river over there. It's over there, that place. So give me letters so that I won't be captured by guys who think I'm here for ill purposes. I mean, they're letters of passage is what they are. So give me letters of passage to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. Oh, and one more super important thing he asks, verse 8, and a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple. Okay, so I need wood as well, not just the stones are probably all there. And if you've ever been to Israel, Israel is all stones. I mean, like everywhere. It's rocky everywhere. And I don't just mean like we have rocks here. They're stones, just everywhere. But wood is not there. That's what you'll find when you go to Israel. There's not much wood there. Most of the wood that they use for big construction came out of Lebanon, where there's presently fighting with Hezbollah. Lebanon has the cedars of Lebanon. So they were very famous for the forests up there. So that's where the wood came from. So he has some guy, this Asaph guy, who's in charge of the forest and the wood in that area. And he says, so as I go back to Judah, I know I'm going to need wood in order to rebuild the gates. Did you notice in that first picture I had of that little stone house, across the top of the door is a big fat piece of wood, because that holds the weight of all the structure above it. And so they needed wood to actually make a door usable so that the stones of the wall above it wouldn't crush down on it. Happens here too. All of the doors in our room right here, all the doors, have a big piece of steel at the very top holding up the brick weight above it. So he needs these timbers to be able to keep that working, as well as making a door itself. They had doors made of wood. You can't make a door made out of stone, even though the Flintstones said you could, but that doesn't work. So he needs not only to rebuild the gates, but to hold up the wall pressure above the doors. You need the wood. So he says, I need the wood for the gates of the fortress of the temple, but also for the gates of the wall of the city and for the house that I shall occupy. So he just needs wood. He just needs wood to do that. So he's asking the king of the superpower of the world, can you allow me passage into your storehouse where all the timbers come from that build your whole kingdom? It's a big ask. It's a big ask. But the king granted what I asked. Woo! Now this is the third time this has happened in both Ezra and Nehemiah, when for some reason, the kings of the superpowers, whether it was Babylon or whether it was the Medo-Persians, and here with the Persians, God somehow influences these kings to give them requests. And so Nehemiah says very clearly, how did that happen? This is how that happened. The good hand of my God was upon me. This is God's doing. This isn't just the good nature of the kings. This is God's doing. He influences the kings of the most important superpowers of the world, and in order to have this happen. Cool. Okay. So I came to the governors of the province beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. So now he's gone all the way from Persia. Takes a couple months by foot to go from Persia over into the eastern end of Turkey today, down through Lebanon, come down the coast, come down through the rest of the promised land, Canaan land, and then down to Judah, which is in the south. He comes to them and he comes to the governors. By the way, he's carrying in the letters. And Nehemiah reminds us, now the king, he sent me with officers of the army and horsemen. So I just didn't have letters signed by the king. I had letters and I had a little army. Whoa. Okay, so these letters are going to have a little bit of impact, especially when they see that I'm accompanied by the officers of the army and horsemen. Horsemen, that's big military. So this is authority. This is an authority statement right here. So I come and I bring these letters. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant heard this, it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. So here's these foreign guys who are really displeased about the fact that it looks like the defenses of Jerusalem are going to be built up. And that's going to benefit the welfare of the people of Israel. And we don't like that. So here's these guys who are intermixed with the Jews back in Judah, and they prefer that Israel stay very vulnerable. Could be these guys are making a little bit of money in terms of the attacking marauders that would come in. We don't know. But these guys were not happy. They were displeased, greatly displeased, that the people of Israel, their welfare was going to be improved. Now, I read that last phrase, and I thought about the current struggles we're having in the Middle East. And there are whole geopolitical groups that are displeased greatly when the welfare of Israel is improved. It's just fascinating to me. We talked some time back about the Gaza confrontation going on right now, and when you I don't know if you remember me saying this, but when you look at the charter documents for Hamas, which was the political party that was they were the ones that were voted into office to run Gaza. Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005. There were no Jews living in Gaza after 2005. Most people don't know that. They were allowed kind of a mini state, and so they needed a political group. They voted Hamas in. Hamas's charter, and you can look this up on the internet, and no one denies this. Hamas's charter is that they want the destruction of Israel. So they're not satisfied with having a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution with no Israel there. So this again, it's exactly this thing right here. Is there are people who are committed to the vulnerability of Israel, not to its welfare, and up to this very present day. And that's these guys right here. They represented the people who would prefer that there not be an improvement of the security there. And by this account, this guy, Sanballat, he's a Horonite, and Tobiah, who's actually an Ammonite servant. So they're opposed. Okay, so he's going to do his plan anyway. So I went to Jerusalem, and I was there 3 days, he says. I was there 3 days. Let me bring the moon in for a second. Because here we go, verse 12. So I arose in the night, and a few men with me, and I told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. There was no animal with me but the one on which I rode, which means he doesn't have a military force. He's just riding around on a donkey or something like that. So his first thing he does when he comes into Jerusalem, at night, so no one sees him, is what he's going to do. He's going to inspect the walls, because it looks like Nehemiah has never been in Jerusalem since the people had started going back. So he's going to inspect and see just exactly how bad it is, but he's going to do it at night so he doesn't raise any kind of alarms. He's already raised the alarms of these other two guys. Let's just do this secretly, he thinks, at night. Let's see how bad it is. So this is his inspection tour at night. So I went out by night by the Valley Gate, that's over on the western side, and the Dragon Spring. I'd like to know more about that, but there's nothing we know about that. The Dragon Spring, and to the Dung Gate. So these are the old gates that used to go through the walls that protected Jerusalem. They always named them. Okay, to this very day, there's a Dung Gate in Jerusalem. Yeah, there is. So anyway, so I went out by these things, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. And then I went on to the Fountain Gate. It's the very southernmost gate in the city. And to the King's Pool down there, but there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass. So he tries to go through the gate, and it's so bad he can't even get his animal through it. So he can't get in there, but he's inspecting it. And so then I went up in the night by the valley and inspected the wall. This is up around the right side of the city, up the eastern side. I inspected the wall. I turned back, entered by the Valley Gate, which is on the western wall. So he goes all the way around the bottom end of the city, and so returned. And the officials didn't know where I had gone or what I was doing. He's doing this totally secretly at night because he knows this is going to be controversial, what he's going to propose, but he wants to see how bad it is. And I had not yet told the Jews or the priests or the nobles in town or the officials or even all the rest of the people who are going to do the work. He's doing this totally secretly. He's doing an inspection tour just to see just how bad it is before he makes a proposal. And then I said to them, look, you see the trouble we're in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let's build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. The suffer derision is because they were so vulnerable that even moderately armed outsiders could come in and take advantage of the city. And that was just embarrassing. That's the derision. Oh, you guys, so what's this about your God? Now you guys have a temple and you're worshiping your God, but he doesn't protect you and we can just kind of walk into the city with our swords and take over? What kind of God do you have? That's the derision they were going through. So he makes his pitch right here to the people in Jerusalem. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good. That's a very important thing, because he's saying, look, this is possible because, just to give you an idea that God is behind this, I'm here, and Artaxerxes allowed me to come here. So God's in this plan, is what he's saying, or I wouldn't be here. Told him about my God, the hand that's been upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let's rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. Woohoo! They're going to rebuild everything. Oh, what? And it's funny because he had to do all this inspection in the dark because he really wasn't sure this proposal was going to fly, not only with the people in Jerusalem and the people around Jerusalem and Judah, You mean we gotta put the wall back together? And you mean we gotta rebuild the gates? I mean, this is a gigantic public service project. This is huge. Why should we do this? And oh, by the way, even if we just start doing this, all of our enemies who've enjoyed our vulnerability will come and stop us in the middle of it because they don't want us to be able to defend ourselves. I mean, this could be hazardous to us. There's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't want to participate. Maybe what we need to do, they were thinking, just leave things the way they are, and we'll pay the tribute to the people who ask for money or food for our protection, mafia style, and, we'll be okay. We're just doing fine. Why do we have to do this? This is really a provocation when you put this kind of defense in. It was the same kind of provocation that happened during Ronald Reagan's administration when he proposed the Star Wars program. And, and all it was a missile interceptor program. I mean, if the Russians have missiles that'll come over here, we need to have counter missiles that'll go up and take them out. And there was a lot of people that said, no, this will be a dramatic provocation of the Russians. In fact, once they find out that we're putting money into creating like a protection system where their missiles can't go through, what they'll do is they'll launch their missiles earlier than later before our defenses are put in place. They'll say, this is our only chance because once they get their thing in place, this Star Wars thing, then our missiles won't be a threat anymore. So a lot of people are saying, don't do it. This will provoke attack. This won't defend us. That was the argument at the time. And that's the argument whenever you increase your defenses. If you have enemies that have enjoyed your vulnerability, they're going to exercise that before you can finish your defenses. So there was some resistance to that. But it's fascinating. The people in Jerusalem and around it in Judah said, let's build it. Let's do this. And largely on what he says right up here in the beginning of verse 18. Because it was clear to them that the hand of God was on this thing. So God will protect us as we do this. God will allow us to do this. This is God's idea. This is not Nehemiah's idea, is what they're saying. We'll go with God's plan. Let's do this. We're all in. Okay. So they strengthen their hands for the good work. Let's do it. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant and Geshem the Arab, we got a new guy in the list, when they heard of it, they jeered at us and despised us and said, what is this thing you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king? He's going to come and take you down. Evidently, they didn't get the memo that that Nehemiah was carrying, or the captains that came with him, or the horses. So they're taunting him. What's this thing you're going to do? You're rebelling against the king, because this could be seen as an actual defensive affront against the king of Persia, because the king of Persia himself enjoyed the vulnerability of Jerusalem. He said he'd take care of it, but after all, this is a defense against all enemies, and you could consider Persia, who is the enemy of Israel, because they took them captive. This is a defensive move against Persia. Do you want to really do that? So they're just taunting him is what they're doing. So then I replied to them, and this is actually the key verse in all the first half of Nehemiah. He says to his taunters, look, the God of heaven will make us prosper, and we, his servants, will arise and build. Oh, yeah. Not just our God. By the way, he has to say the God of heaven, because back in that day, false gods were always epitomized by having these little statues above your sink in your kitchen. And you make a little altar right there, and you sacrifice it. Or maybe you have an altar in your living room with candles around it. You make offerings to them. So their idea of God was this, little statue, that you put someplace. But what Nehemiah is just clearly right in saying is, we're not talking about one of those gods. We're talking about the God of heaven. The God of heaven. The guy who made all of this stuff. We are here under his protection. The God of heaven will make us prosper. And prosper, by the way, is a word that doesn't mean just rich or something like that. It means the anticipated end to a process. Okay? That's prospering. So he says, what we're about to do here, this process we're going to do, it's going to end in a good place. And why? Because the God of heaven is behind this. Okay? And so as a result of the fact that God is behind this and God has proclaimed this, we're going to do it because we're his servants, and we're going to rise and we're going to build neener. Well, that part's not in there. But this is really an in-your-face to these guys' criticism. He says, I don't care what you guys say. I don't care what you guys say. And in fact, he says, You have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not something you should consider to be your vulnerable bounty anytime you want to walk into it and threaten us. You have no place in Jerusalem. And he uses three great words. You have no portion. Portion is your inheritance you get. You know, they call that a portion when Joshua brought them into the land. You know, the land that they got, that was our portion. Draw a line around where our tribe's supposed to live. You weren't on that list, guys. We were. You have no portion. You have no right. There was no promises made to you. And you have no claim. That's a legal claim from the past. You have no claim in the future for this. You guys are not written into anything that pertains to this land. So just butt out. Or basically, it's none of your business. Okay? So he just tells them right off. But he tells them right off, not based on the fact that Nehemiah and the Israelites are just determined to do this. He tells them off on the basis of the fact that the God of heaven said, do this. Back off. Whoa. That's why this is the best verse in the whole first half of Nehemiah. Great stuff. We'll come back to it, in fact. So let's build it. Do we have time? We have time. Let's build it. You ready? You just finished one chapter. Did you know that? We're going to do another one. Here we go. Let's build it. Now, it turns out that Nehemiah is big on naming names. So we're going to name a lot of names this morning. I'm not going to use the computer voice today. We're going to try and read them ourselves. But you need to map it, because here's kind of these are the old walls of Jerusalem before they were taken into captivity. These are the walls that existed at the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the walls that you see on the right, the red ones, the dotted red ones, those are not going to be rebuilt in this rebuilding right now. We're going to leave them like they were. They're just going to rebuild this weird-looking shape right here. And it's weird because it turns out that section that you see there on the left, that's the section that was inhabited before the exile, as well as that was over there. But this one over here is the only area that they're going to inhabit now after rebuilding it. In fact, it looks like, based on the text, that right region right there is the only region that the returnees have actually settled in so far. They haven't spread out over the whole area. So by the time you get to, for instance, Hezekiah as king, but definitely before Nebuchadnezzar comes in and knocks the place down, that both green areas are inhabited. But they're just going to focus on that one on the right. They're just going to rebuild that skinny, kind of weird wall. Now, why that skinny shape particularly? If you know the geography of Jerusalem, you know this really well. It turns out there's some valleys. There's the Kidron Valley on the right, there's the Hinnom Valley on the bottom, and the Central Valley right there. And so it turns out that little skinny piece on the southern part of that right thing right there, it's bounded by valleys on three sides. So what I tell people is, and the thing on top, that big square section on the top, is a flat area. So it's kind of like when I describe what Jerusalem looks like geographically, I do this with my hand, this is the square area on top, and then there's a little finger of land that comes down like this. And that's that little finger on the bottom. And then the part on the far left is just kind of downhill. So this little finger right here is why there's a finger right there. It's got a valley on all sides of it except on the northern side, which makes it incredibly defensible. It's very secure because armies cannot assault going uphill. So if you have a piece of land, and that's that skinny section right there, that is the most defensible part of Jerusalem. So if you're going to build someplace and have security, go right there, because there's a deep valley on the right, there's a moderate valley on the left, and a very deep valley on the bottom. Very defensible. So if you put just walls around that skinny finger, they can't come at you unless they come from the north. Yeah. And the flat spot on top it's got a problem, because every time that Jerusalem is attacked successfully in the Bible, the guys are coming from the north, because that's the flat ground area. If you come up from the south, you got to deal with these three valleys. If you go to Jerusalem today, you'll see those valleys. They're still there. They're still there. So the city of David is this skinny section right here, because that was the best place to live. It's the most secure area to live, and that's where David lived, as well as some of the early inhabitants there, because of that nice skinny finger that comes down. Beautiful place to live. You got great views in three directions, and you have great security, even if you just build modest walls at the top of the hills. Today, when you go in the Kidron Valley has kind of risen up a little bit because dirt or something fills up, and the depth is kind of diminished over time. But it's still very much there. The Kidron Valley is very much there. I was arrested by by the Israeli Defense Force there years ago. That's another story for another time. But it was in the Kidron Valley. They let me out. Okay, I'll tell you the story just really quick. I was running when I was there in 1971. I was running at night with two friends of mine. I was in high school at the time. We're running. We started from the top right of that picture, that corner on the top right, and we came down the Kidron Valley. We headed south in the Kidron Valley. We're running at night. I did something to my ankle. I hurt it really badly. I got halfway down the Kidron Valley. I said, "Look, guys, I got to stop. I got to go back to the hotel. Like I can't run anymore. I can barely walk." And they said, "Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to continue down to the bottom of the Kidron Valley, and then we're going to turn right, and we're going to go up to the bottom side of the Mount of Olives, because the Mount of Olives is the ridge just to the right of the Kidron Valley. We'll go around that, and then we'll come back and pick you up." So I sat on the side curve of the road that goes right down the center of the Kidron Valley, trying to figure out why my ankle wouldn't work. Pitch black at night, few cars because it was in a small road. And then I thought, well, I'll start walking back slowly because surely they'll pick me up. So I turned around, started walking back north on the Kidron Valley to go back to my hotel. And then suddenly I heard the screeching of tires stopping a vehicle, and the headlights of that vehicle shone through my legs, casting my shadow on the ground. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to be abducted. And then I heard a machine gun rack. And I thought, well, okay, so much for my trip to Israel. And then someone screamed something, and to my relief, it was screamed in Hebrew. It wasn't screamed in Arabic. You can tell. I screamed in Hebrew, and so I just slowly kind of raised my hands like this, and then I slowly turned around to face the headlights of the car that was behind me. It was a Jeep that had a .50 caliber machine gun mounted in the back of it, and it had IDF, Israeli Defense Force guys in it. And they started speaking to me in Hebrew, asking me why I was out there all by myself. And then I spoke back in English. They switched to English, and they said, "You're an idiot to be out here by yourself, because this is dangerous. This is dangerous. You could be abducted. You don't understand." Now, this was 1971. The Yom Kippur War was 2 years later, where all the nations around Israel invaded it. The 1967 Six-Day War was just a handful of years before. So, I mean, this is a big deal. So get in the Jeep. We'll drive you back to your hotel. So I got in the Jeep right next to the .50 caliber. We drove up to the top of the Kidron Valley, went around the top of the top right of that picture over to where my hotel was out there, and then I went back to the hotel. And my friends came back in, and they said, "We thought we'd find you somewhere between where we left you, and how did you get back here?" And then I told them the whole story, and I told them that you guys are idiots for leading me out there. So that was the end of the story. By the way, one of those idiots that took me out there to run was the guy that I went back to Vietnam to last year in December. Yeah. Okay, let's get on with building the city. So that's there to this very day. Okay, the temple is up in that big flat area on top. So keep that in mind, all right, because that's a big deal, the flat area on top. Okay, let's build the city. Are you ready? We're going to build it counterclockwise. He's going to not just build it, but he's going to describe how it's going to be built. As he describes who's in charge of rebuilding what parts of the wall, he's going to describe it to us counterclockwise, starting from the very top of that square area on top. And then he's going to go around counterclockwise. So, okay, now, here we go. We're in chapter 3, verse 1. Then Eliashib, the high priest, rose up with his brothers and priests, and they built the sheep gate. Where's that? Right there at the top. So that's where we're going to start describing who's rebuilding what. At the sheep gate, by the way, that was probably called the sheep gate because it enters into the side of the temple area where you sacrifice sheep, and it's flat right there. So that's where the sheep would come into the temple. Where's the Golan Heights? Way off the picture. Okay, let's build the city. Come to the sheep gate. And they consecrated as far as the Tower of the 100 and as far as the Tower of Hananel, which is just this little section right here on the top, okay? So they consecrated there. And next to him, the men of Jericho built, and next to them, Zachar, the son of Imri, built. So when we're not talking about a gate in this narrative, we're talking about pieces of the wall next to that gate. So different people, men of Jericho, and next to them, the people of Zachar, the son of Imri, they took a section, and they built that section. So actually, this section is going to the left of the sheep gate up there. And the sons of Hazanah built the fish gate, which is that corner one right there. They actually fixed the gate. And how? They laid its beams, set its doors, its bolts, and its bars. That's all the pieces of the gate. Took a little bit of wood, took a little bit of iron, and they built the gate. They fixed the gate. But next to them, okay, on just the wall section, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Hakaz, he's repaired a section next to him. Next to them, a section next to them, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, son of Meshezabel, repaired. And then next to them, these are just guys that are fixing pieces of the wall. as you go counterclockwise. Next to them, Zadok, the son of Baana, repaired. And next to them, the Tekoites repaired, but, their nobles wouldn't stoop to serve the Lord. I love that. Yeah, okay, they were building the wall, but not their nobles. They went, no, I don't think we're not going to do that. So they didn't do that. Tekoites, by the way, Tekoa is just an area very south of Bethlehem in the arid areas. Okay, and then Yoiada, the son of Basia, and Meshullam, the son of Basodiah, repaired the gate of Yeshaniah. Where's that? Right there. Right there. They laid its beams. Here's the gate again. They laid its beams, set its doors, its bolts, its bars. Gate fixed by these guys right here. But next to them, now we're talking about the wall pieces, next to them repaired Melatiah and the Gibeonite and Jadon the Meronothite and the men of Gibeon. These are all regions north of Jerusalem, and of Mizpah, the seat of the governor of the province beyond the river. They took the next section of wall. Next section of wall, next to them, Uziel, the son of Herahiah, goldsmiths, they repaired. Next to him, another piece of wall, Hananiah, one of the perfumers. One of the perfumers was working on the wall. Okay, so there you go. Perfumers, they repaired and they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. I'll say that. I'll come back to that in a second. And next to them, Rephaiah, the son of Hur, Ben-Hur. Son, actually, in the Hebrew, that says Ben, son, Hur. Just wanted to point that out. Same Ben-Hur as, no, but it's in the Bible. So that's where they took it from, actually, right there. Next to him, Rephaiah, the son of Ben-Hur, son of Hur, ruler of half the district of Jerusalem. So this is really interesting. Ruler of half the district of Jerusalem. So now we're talking nobles. We're talking civic leaders who are actually picking up stones and rebuilding the wall. Good for them. Good. This broad wall right here was actually, that was the name for this red wall on the top here that was not being rebuilt at this time. In fact, it was built probably by either Hezekiah or Uzziah. We're not sure. But because I told you, remember, the most vulnerable direction where all the invasions worked was from the north, they made that wall right there, this wall right here, before Nebuchadnezzar. That was one of the most fortified walls in the entire town. And it's called the Broad Wall because it's really thick. And in fact, what they did, it says in verse 8, is they worked on this black wall until they got to the intersection to the broad wall. That's the red wall right there. And by the way, that's this whole section is called the Broad Wall right here. Old section, built probably by Hezekiah, is my guess, years before. It was really quite defensible. But if you go to Jerusalem today, you can see it. There it is. That's the Broad Wall. And if it's currently in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem, Jerusalem is put into different quarters. And it's right smack dab in the middle where most of the Jews live in Jerusalem. And they excavated right here, and they found the base of it. So this is actually what you're seeing right now is not the whole wall. It's the base of it. When that wall was taken down by Nebuchadnezzar, he knocked it down to street level. And this you see right here is street level of the broad wall at the time. And you know how high that wall was supposed to be? Right here is a measuring stick that's marked off in meters. It would have been as high as this top section right here. That's how high this was. So the broad wall is broad because it's 7 meters wide, 7 yards wide, and actually 8 to 9 yards tall. That's a lot of rocks. So what you're seeing right here is what was exposed by Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BC. That's as low as it went from Nebuchadnezzar. Wow. And you can go into Israel and you can see it today. That's the broad wall. So he's talking about in the narrative where they fixed the Jerusalem wall, this black wall, where it intersects with the broad wall. That picture, by the way, is just under the sea in BC. It's right about there in Jerusalem, the broad wall. And those things around it are all Jewish apartments in the Jewish quarter. It's kind of cool. Okay, let's keep building the wall. What do you say? Next to them, so we're building more pieces of wall, Yediah, the son of Harumaph, repaired opposite his house. He figured, I live close to this. I'll fix the wall next to my house. Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Next to him, Hattush, the son of, Hashbadaiah, repaired. Malchijah, the son of Haram, and Hashub, the son of Pahath Moab, repaired another section, and the Tower of Ovens. The Tower of Ovens is actually right down here. Why it's called the Tower of Ovens, not quite sure, but we'll just leave that. So they repaired another section going down to the Tower of Ovens. Next to him, more wall being built, Shallum, the son of Halahesh and ruler of half the district of Jerusalem, he repaired, he and his daughters. So now we're talking about like a mayor of half of Jerusalem and his daughters. So not only is he, he's He's a noble. And he could have said, well, I would come and fix things, but I've only got daughters. No! He said, I've got daughters and we're going to work on this. Great dedication. There's a lot of subtext in the way that's written. He and his daughters did this. Okay. Hanun and the inhabitants of Zanoah repaired the valley gate. Where's the valley gate? There's the valley gate. Which valley? It's actually the entry into the Central Valley, which I have not written here. The Central Valley is a more mild valley, so that would be a place you'd come in, because you wouldn't come in from either the Hinnom or the Kidron Valley, because they're very deep. I mean, it's like climbing hills. But the Central Valley, not too bad. So there's a valley gate there. They rebuilt it, and again, set its doors, its bolts, its bars. One family did that. And repaired 1,000 cubits of the wall as far as the dung gate. All of this area right here, that little square at the bottom is the dung gate. So this one family ended up repairing not only the valley gate itself, but 1,000 cubits of the wall. A cubit is 1.5 feet. Yes, that's a cubit. So this is roughly 6 football fields in length. Yeah, anyway. They took to fixing the wall right there. Just a mammoth undertaking. A mammoth undertaking. Did I do that right? 1.5 times 1,000, that's 1,800 feet. 1,800 feet, 300 feet, 6 football fields. Okay. Amazing. Well, now, Malchijah, the son of Rechab, ruler of the district of Beth Hakerem, another noble, he repaired the dung gate. The dung gate. He repaired the dung gate. He rebuilt it, set its doors, its bolts, its bars. Again, another noble in the city. Another noble in the city. This was not beneath them to rebuild this. Okay? Rebuilt the dung gate. And Shallum, the son of Kolhoseh, ruler of the district of Mizpah, another noble, ruler of the district of Mizpah. He repaired the fountain gate. Well, the fountain gate is right down here. It's right next to the dung gate. It's kind of an odd juxtaposition, but it turns out that the fountain gate down here, most probably because that was a source of water in town. There's a spring that's why Jerusalem can be Jerusalem. There's a spring, but it's not located down there. It's actually located half up the right side over here. And Hezekiah built a tunnel right under that section until it came out right down there as a defensive posture against the bad guys. So there's water down there. And by the way, since there's so much water coming from the spring inside, underground, in an underground tunnel that Hezekiah built, since it comes down here, this is the exit point of the tunnel of all that water. And so that's where you'd build a pool down there. That's the pool of Siloam, is down there where that drains. However, since it's also the lowest part of the city, because remember I told you there's a flat part on top and then there's this little thing that comes down. This tip right here you see in the southern part of the picture is the lowest part of the city. If you put human excrement out on the streets and let the rain wash it down, it ends up going down to the same place. That's where the dung gate and the fountain gate are in the same place. Oh, but today, if you go to Israel, if you go to Jerusalem, you can go down. They're excavating the place of the Pool of Siloam. And it's fascinating. It's one of the newest excavations they're doing. They had to wait till they could buy enough property so they could dig under it. But the Pool of Siloam was a square, kind of shallow pool that had stair steps going down into it around all four sides. You can go there and you can see the stair steps going down in the Pool of Siloam. Right down there where the water comes down. And, don't tell anyone this, but right above your heads when you're standing on the stair steps of the Pool of Siloam, if you turn around and look toward the city, you'll see this big, ugly black pipe about 10 feet in diameter that's coming down behind you. It's all the sewage of Jerusalem. You don't know, people don't tell you that, but to this very day, the dung gate and the fountain gate coexist down the bottom of Jerusalem. It's just fascinating to me. Well, so he also built the wall of the Pool of Shelah. There you go, Shelah. It's right down here, this thing. That's the Pool of Siloam or the Pool of Shelah. I think that's how you say it, so, you know. And then also the King's Garden. There's some conjecture about that, but they're pretty sure it's down there where there's water. It's one of the few places in Jerusalem that has water. So the king built a garden. Where would you build it? Where there's water. So they did. They went down. They rebuilt that as well. As far as the stairs that go down from the city of David. Remember the city of David is the skinny thing? It's the finger that comes down. There's stairs that go down because that goes downhill all the way. There's actually a quite prominent walkway that goes down the city of David. And to this very day, if you go down to the Pool of Siloam, you can climb back up the road that goes back uphill that goes up toward the temple area. So that's what they did. Good for them. Shallum and the son of Kolazah. Yeah. After him, Nehemiah the son of Azbuk, a different Nehemiah, ruler of half the district of Bethzer, again, another noble, he repaired to a point opposite the tombs of David, as far as the artificial pool, and as far as the house of the mighty men. We're not exactly sure where all those places are, but we're pretty sure it's somewhere along this eastern wall over here. And now you're in the Kidron Valley. Going down in the Kidron Valley from Jerusalem, it's very steep. I mean, it's very steep. And so they're actually at the top of this very steep hill that ends in this little finger that goes down. So they're repairing stuff on that side over there. After him, the Levites repaired, Rehum, the son of Bani. Now that's a big deal, because what do the Levites do as a profession? Religious guys. They're the ones that make the temple run. So even the guys who make the temple run didn't stand back and say, no, that works beneath us. Even the Levites did this, and they did this on the steep side of the town. Next to him, more wall, Hashabiah, ruler of half the district of Keilah, another noble, repaired for his district. Figured this is where we live, so we might as well. 18, after him, their brothers repaired. Bavai, the son of Hanadad, ruler of half the district of Keilah. So again, people in charge who are actually professionally charged with the welfare of the people rebuilt the walls for the welfare of the people. You mean a politician was acting on behalf of the people? There it is. There it is. It's amazing. 19. Well, next to him, another piece of wall, Ezer, the son of Yeshua, ruler of Mizpah, repaired another section. Ruler of Mizpah, another noble, repaired another section opposite the ascent to the armory at the buttress. I'm not sure exactly where that is, but it's on that side. After him, Baruch, the son of Zabbai, repaired in another section from the buttress to the door of the house of Eliashib, the high priest. Not sure, but it's on that side. Pretty sure. After him, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, son of Hakaz, repaired another section from the door of the house of Eliashib to the end of the house of Eliashib. Good for him, somewhere over there. After him, the priests, the men of the surrounding area, repaired. Again, religious guys doing heavy work, which is good. 23. After them, Benjamin and Hashab repaired opposite their house. The wall's at our house. I guess we'll fix the wall. That's what they did. After them, Azariah, the son of Maaseiah, and the son of Ananiah, repaired beside his own house. By the way, there was a lot of view houses along this wall because of the steep valley that came down. Not only because of the view out into the valley, but because it's the most secure place in town. It's by the steep valley cliff. After him, Benui, the son of Henadad, repaired another section from the house of Azariah to the buttress and to the corner, somewhere over there. Palel, the son of Uzai, repaired opposite the buttress and the tower projecting from the upper house of the king at the court of the guard. That's on the north side, we know. And after him, Pedaiah, the son of Parash, and the temple servants living on Ophel. Where's Ophel? It's right there. That's that kind of pinkish area right there. The people living there repaired to a point opposite the water gate on the east and the projecting tower. Well, repaired there to a point opposite the water gate. The water gate is there. And we're not talking about President Nixon, we're talking about the Watergate, not the Watergate. Watergate. Watergate right there. That's actually right to this day where the spring is that comes up in Jerusalem, that waters all of Jerusalem, comes up right there. And right there then a tunnel goes in under that skinny piece of land, Hezekiah's tunnel, and comes down at the bottom. That's where it comes out. After him, the Tekoites repaired another section opposite the great projecting wall as far as the wall of Ophel. So that's that section right there for sure. We know for sure. And then above the horse gate, where's the horse gate? There's the horse gate right over there. Above the horse gate, the priests repaired, each one opposite his own house. By the way, that's called the horse gate, presumably because you have to come across the Kidron Valley. And the Kidron Valley is so deep and steep coming up, few people want to do it on foot. You're going to do it on a donkey or a horse, something like that. All the gates on the north side you can walk in. Most of the gates coming from the central valley, which is on the left side. Not too deep a valley, but that one, you're going to want a horse to get to that gate. So that's why they call it that. After them, Zadok the son of Immer repaired opposite his own house. After him, Shemaiah the son of Shechaniah, the keeper of the east gate, repaired. The east gate actually is an inner gate into the courtyard of the temple. So somewhere up in this region right here we're talking about. After him, more talking about that wall over there, after him, Hananiah, the son of Shelemiah. Shelemiah, there it is. Yeah. Shelemiah and Hanan, the sixth son of Zalaph, repaired another section of the wall. After him, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, repaired opposite his chamber. After him, Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths. This is a jeweler. Okay, a guy that's not really up for heavy work. Repaired as far as the house of the temple servants. Well, this is the temple. The temple servants lived very close to the temple, probably in this little piece of land between the temple open area and the actual wall itself. The house of the temple servants of the merchants, opposite the muster gate. The muster gate is the bottom gate that's starting from, and to the upper one, and to the upper chamber of the corner. And where's the upper chamber of the corner? There's the corner right there. So we're moving up to this total northeast corner right there. Between the upper chamber of the corner and the sheep gate, that's where we started. The goldsmiths and the merchants repaired that area, and now we've completed our counterclockwise rebuild of the walls and the gates of Jerusalem. I'm tired just reading it. Now, a lot of those places I pointed out, there's some conjecture behind some of those places. We know the general area, and we know that Nehemiah was describing in a counterclockwise direction. So we sort of know where that is. To this very day, this outer wall starting from here and going up, that's still there. That's still there. Well, I'll show you in just a second. Okay, let me just show you a superposition of Jerusalem today. Now, this probably doesn't mean much to you, but this is over the old city of Jerusalem is inside this wall. This yellow wall right here was not built during that time. It was built much, much later, around the time of the Crusades and of the Islamic invasions in the area, the 7th, 8th, 9th centuries. So it's an old wall. It's an old wall. You know, the newest part of that yellow wall is probably from the 1200s. And that's new in Jerusalem when it's from the 1200s. So, but there's a wall there today. That's the old walled city. And then right down here below, there's a little piece of land. You can see it when you stand there. There's this is still there this very day. And it's a ridge that goes down. That's the city of David right there, outside of the walled city, the old walled city of Jerusalem. Some of the most productive archaeological digs right now are in the city of David. I mean, they're new and they're providing astonishing things. There's even an exposed hillside right here on the right side where they show the retaining walls made of stones, which may have dated back to this era. You can go take a look at it. But geographically, you can see that city of David right there. And then just for clarity, that's the area that's roped off around the Dome of the Rock, or what's called the Al-Haram al-Sharif by the Islamics. And that's, Dome of the Rock is in the middle of it. That's a controlled area by the Islamic interests inside Jerusalem today. So I'll superimpose now the map we've been looking at as we rebuilt the city. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right there. So this piece of land on the bottom, the city of David, maps perfectly. The extent of the broad wall that goes across here, and then it actually doubles up as the wall here, and then it goes way down south here to the Hinnom Valley. But you can see the problem today when you want to talk about rebuilding where the old temple was. Well, the old temple is in exactly the same spot as the Dome of the Rock. So that's kind of a problem. The upper parts of the city, from this upper part here, above the broad wall and north, were built much later. So the oldest inhabitants of Jerusalem were actually in the city of David, the skinny finger, and the temple up here. That's the oldest parts. And then that was re-inhabited in the 5th century BC during the time of Nehemiah, that part. It was expanded out here. It was expanded out here in the centuries between Nehemiah and the coming of Jesus. They moved out that direction. But what's interesting here is that a large amount of the city was in this bottom half down here, right down to the Hinnom Valley. This is the Hinnom Valley right down here. You see this road? That road is at the bottom of the Hinnom Valley. And there's another road right here that's in the Kidron Valley. And I was arrested somewhere around here. Yeah. So, I mean, that's where it is today. Okay, let's do a wrap-up. Let's look at a couple things. I told you this is the key verse right here. By the way, you just finished 2 chapters of Nehemiah. Write it down somewhere. Good for you. This is the verse that really makes a difference. The God of heaven will make us prosper, and we, his servants, will arise and build. You remember what this statement was replied to? It was replied to this when these guys says, are you rebelling against the king? You know, where's the authority for what you're doing? And so the first thing you want to point out, I'm just going to make 3 brief observations, is the fact that sometimes it is a conflict between rebelling against the king or serving God. Now, in this particular case, it was not rebelling against the king because God had already turned the heart of the king in order to allow them to do this. But there is a fundamental conflict that many times comes up in life where you have to choose whether to obey the going magistrates or to be obedience to God. Now, Nehemiah went to the king after praying, God, what should I do? And God said, go down there, rebuild the place, and by the way, my hand is on you because look what I'm going to do with the king. So the best scenario in all these occasions where you know that you may be resisted by the magistrates in your area for whatever reason that is to actually do what Nehemiah does, is go to them and say, look, I have a need, and voice your need, and perhaps maybe God will be working on their hearts. Now, I took this to heart here in Brigham City back in 2013, when we got word about the fact that the city wanted to knock down this building and turn it into grass. And they were going to use eminent domain law, which is legal to do that. It's legal to do that. So I thought, well, you know what I need to do? I need to do a Nehemiah. I need to go to the mayor, at the time Dennis Fife. I need to go to the mayor and say, look, you know, we want to stay where we are. Perhaps is there a way in your plans that we can stay where we are and still your plans can still be met? I had to at least do that. I had to go to his face and tell him, look, this is the deal. This is what we want to do. Now the hand of the Lord was not with me at that time, because all he responded was, tell me what I need to do to get you off your property, quote unquote. That's what he said to me. And I realized he wasn't really in this discussion for the welfare of the people at this church. So I said, well, I don't think there is anything you can do, but we want to participate with it. But if you come up with an alternative property and you're willing to fund the cost that it'll cost us to move the alternative property, we probably would go for that. That's how we can have both of our stuff. So that started a whole period where we started looking at property around town. The only property they were offering was the parking lot, the public parking lot behind B&B, you know, the bar over here. So we'd be alongside them. However, it turns out in the final assessment that wouldn't have worked because there's a state law about churches being too close to liquor businesses. He thought there might be an out because it wasn't like the bar was moving next to the church. It was a church moving next to a bar. I don't know. Anyway, but this is what we need to do. When you know that you're in potential conflict and you know where the conflict's going to happen, do a Nehemiah, go in front of him and say, and confront him. Just do it. Do a face-to-face. I mean, that's what Nehemiah does. He does a face-to-face. And sure enough, he discovers that the hand of God is with him because God changes the heart of the leader. That's an amazing thing. Presume that God can do that because it happened here. If it doesn't happen, well, then you continue on your way in some other way. So, yeah. By the way, as a PS to that story, I think the reason that we are still in this building is because the hand of God was with us. Even if he didn't change the heart of Dennis Fife. So, and I pray for Dennis. He doesn't live here anymore. But okay, let me make another point too. He'll make us proper, and we, his servants, will arise and build. So it's clear here that what you see in the rebuilding of the city of Jerusalem, you don't see God miraculously with these tractor beams pick up the rocks and from heaven rebuild the walls. He relies on his servants, the people that live in the area. So he engages us. He engages the people of God in these kinds of things. But God is the one that makes it prosper, even though we may be the ones that pick up the rocks and build the walls. And remember I said the word prosper means something deliberate. And I'll show you what that means. I'll bring a quote up here for you. But I want you to think about this. Many times when we think about Nehemiah, we say Nehemiah built the wall of Jerusalem. Nehemiah did not build the wall of Jerusalem. God's people built the wall of Jerusalem and caused that effort to prosper because that was from God. That was God's idea to do that. So it's an obvious thing, but don't miss it. When God moves in a providential way, you may expect him to move through you in terms of what's going to happen. That's what happened here for sure. Because God doesn't need all these people to rebuild the gates and rebuild the wall. He could snap his finger and you would have, a rock solid security edifice. But God says, no, I want you guys involved. I want you guys involved with what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make your efforts prosper. They're going to get to where they need to be. Now that's a very good lesson too in the first century church and even for us today. Because Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 12 about the body. Just as the body is one, has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. We're actually one body. For the body does not consist of one member, but many. And then he goes on, this is still in chapter 12. But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them, as he chose. If we were all a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there's many parts, yet one body. And what you see in the description of the rebuilding of Jerusalem, did you see that list of all the people who said, I'll do this gate, I'll do this section. I'll do this gate, I'll do this section. Someone else says, great, I'll work on these sections over here. And so the body was many in this particular case. And many people responded to the call that Nehemiah said, let's just rebuild it. And they all did, and they all took a chunk of it. And they didn't take all the same chunk. They all took different chunks. And that's very reflective of what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 12. In the body of Christ, we all don't have the same giftedness, and we definitely, none of us are elite, because you saw in this list, the magistrates were out there rolling up their sleeves building stuff. It was not beneath them. Even that one magistrate who could have used the fact that he doesn't have any sins, all he's got his daughters, but he and his daughters were building it. Woo! So the body of Christ is diverse, and it's a wonderful thing that God gifts us differently, like he says in 1 Corinthians 12. You can read about it. The expectation from God is that because he has composed local congregations and local bodies with people that have varying giftedness from him, is that we engage for the one purpose of glorifying God in those different ways. And everyone is necessary, or else one piece of the wall is not going to be rebuilt. So that's the body of Christ in the New Testament. That's the body of Christ up to this very day. We count on the fact that there's not just one player. In fact, that's why I said at the start, Nehemiah didn't build the walls. It was this distributed group of people that were there that God led to do that. That's how things work today. So we have needs here in the congregation. We have different qualifications. We have different skills. And we blend them together, and we accomplish one thing in glorifying God, like they accomplished one thing in providing security for Jerusalem. So I think it's an obvious point, but I didn't want that to go past us. Okay, and then finally, let me talk about that word prosper again. That word prosper, when I look at the theological word book of the Old Testament, that's what twat means, by the way. The theological workbook of the Old Testament. It describes this very curious word from Hebrew. The root of this word means to accomplish satisfactorily what's intended. So again, it's the end of the process. That's prosperity. Okay, there's a process that's implied, and that the end will be good, and you'll get to where you're trying to go. That's what prosperity means. It doesn't just mean rich. It means the end of a process. So what he was saying when he said this in 2:20 is the fact that the God of heaven will make us prosper. That is, the God of heaven will make it so that this process we're going to go through in terms of rebuilding the security of Jerusalem, this process will have a good end. It's not just going to be knocked down by another Nebuchadnezzar. It'll have a good end. It'll be good for it. It will be prosperous. It'll be fine. So remember, he was challenged just before this statement. Are you rebelling against the king? As though, so you put all this effort into rebuilding the city of Jerusalem? Artaxerxes is just going to come in and knock it all down again. He likes you to be vulnerable. He says, no, God's going to maintain the fact that at the end of this prosperous, it'll be good, and it'll be at its right end. It'll be what we intended. It'll be prosperous. God guarantees that. But God uses our elbow grease in the process to get there. So I wanted to show some passages on that, because this is interesting. In Nehemiah 1, this is what Nehemiah prayed at the end of his prayer, which we started off with this morning. And he used this word. He used this word right there in yellow. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. Well, the success he's talking about immediately wasn't necessarily the rebuilding of the walls. It was, if I go to the king Artaxerxes, is it a waste of my time, or will I meet with success after that process of meeting with the king? That's what the word means, success at the end of that process. Should I even approach the king? That's what he's thinking. He's not even sure what his role is going to be in all of this, because he has to pray when the king asks, what are you exactly praying for? What do you want from me? But he's saying right here in his prayer, make it so that the end of this process that I'm anticipating with this man will go to a productive place. That's what he's praying right here. So he uses that word here. That's the success of your servant in the sight of this man. Make it so that when I have this meeting today with the king, it goes down to a satisfactory end of what I intended, even though I don't know what that's going to be. Another great passage, 2 Chronicles 26. Uzziah, king in Israel, Uzziah was 16 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. Skip to verse 5. And as long as he sought the Lord, God made him prosper. And so here's a connection coming up, because we've seen this in Nehemiah already. As long as Uzziah, who was the king in Israel at the time, sought the Lord, God prospered. That is, God made the process of what Uzziah was doing in the kingdom come to a good end. It was productive. It wasn't for loss. It wasn't a waste of time. And so the key to that is that he sought the Lord. He didn't seek prosperity itself. He sought the Lord. And then the Lord brought prosperity. And that's a really important distinction right here, because many times in prosperity, we end up getting sidetracked by the nature of what prosperity looks like. And so that's what we focus on. We seek the prosperity. With Uzziah, and you'll see in a second, that's not how it works. You seek the Lord, and he provides prosperity. Okay? Let me give you another kingly example. Hezekiah, the guy that created the tunnel that came down to the fountain gate down at the bottom. 2 Chronicles 31:21. Every work that he undertook. Okay, there's the work part. Every work that he undertook in the service of the house of God and in accordance with the law and the commandments, seeking his God, he did with all his heart and prospered. But what preceded this last line? Seeking his God. Same thing as with Uzziah. You don't seek the prosperity itself. You seek God. God then responds in prosperity. Seek God for your good, and God brings that good. Another place, Psalm 1, and I'll finish with this. This is the very first verse of all the Psalms. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. And he's like a tree that's planted by streams of water, that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. Why does he prosper? Because he's wise or smart or dedicated or diligent? None of those things. None of those things. He prospers because he delights in what God says. He delights in his law. And in the end, then, in all that he does, stacking rocks to make a wall, carving out doors to make gates, putting iron bolts on those, in all that he does, he prospers. Why? Because he made prosperity his God? No, because he made God his God. And then God brought prosperity. So clearly, just for those three examples, that's the way that it works. And the twisting in the current day theology about prosperity gospel, we call it, is the seeking, it's a very subtle switching of seeking prosperity and then I'll look for God. But the issue is you need to look for God and seek him. That needs to be the heart of all that you're pursuing. And that's why he meditates day and night. And that's why it works. You seek God's good, and then God brings good into your life. That's the way it works. The giver of all good things is God himself. And we saw that every good gift comes from above, it says in James. So seek God, and that happens. It's a matter of putting the cart before the horse when it's wrong. But I love this last line. What's the product of that? I mean, is this guy wasting his time delighting in the law of God, meditating on the law of God? Is he wasting his time? He says, no, it's just like a tree that's planted in such a place that when the weather gets bad, it doesn't wither, it doesn't die. There's roots to this guy's life, and that's what he's saying. There's roots to this person's life who delights in God and his word. And then when the seasons are horrible, it still doesn't wither. And so this is my favorite picture to show that. I love this picture. This is a tree that's planted. On the one side behind it is sand dunes. But in front of it is a river. Now you move that tree, another 50 yards toward the sand, and it's dead. It's dead. The roots are what's different. The roots go down somewhere where there's actually water. And that's what he's talking about right there. There's another place in Jeremiah that uses the same picture. And so the idea is that if you pursue the Lord, which is in this particular case, in terms of the picture. If you pursue the Lord, which is you put down roots where there's living water, you'll prosper. You'll prosper. Because the Lord is the source of that prospering. He's the one that brings good in your life. Seek the Lord. Seek the Lord while he may be found. That's what's important. Yeah. So the God of heaven will make us prosper if we plant seeds of trees next to where God is. If we just keep pursuing God. If we just keep pursuing God. And we're going to close with that. Okay. So good for you. You got through 2 chapters of Nehemiah today. And you didn't laugh once when I stumbled over all those names. I'm very proud of you. Very proud of you. But it is interesting that Nehemiah wants to make the point about the fact that the entire nation that had an interest in their welfare decided to step up to the bar, listen to what Nehemiah said, not because Nehemiah was a populist leader in any sense. Nehemiah was just a man on whom the hand of God had been placed. And clearly he could say, let's rebuild. And they went, yes. And everybody took a piece. Everybody took a piece. And some rebuilt gates. And some rebuilt wall sections until in the end, the entirety is surrounded. Now, the job of rebuilding Jerusalem is not done yet, but every piece of it is starting to be worked on. But what you'll find out as we go on just next time, and you can cheat by reading the Bible if you want, but how long do you think it took them to absolutely complete the task of rebuilding the gates and rebuilding the stone walls to their height? Just guess. Don't tell me right now. You guess. And if you can't stand it before next week, you can read it for yourself. But you'll be absolutely amazed. Intrigue. Okay, let's pray. Father, you indeed are intent on our welfare. You are intent on our welfare because you are a Father that loves us tremendously. And as is written in the Scriptures, if you gave your Son for us, what are you going to withhold now? You're intent on our welfare. And you're also a God who's intent on involving us in the works of your hand, in the places where we are. And we are delighted by that, and we're astonished by that. You involve us in such important work. And yet, Lord, none of us can claim as we do the works of our hands that we guaranteed the outcome or the benefit was guaranteed by us. We were involved and we did a lot of stuff. But in the end, we need to turn and just clearly state, God is the one who brought the prospering here. We're just hands, but God prospered. God's the one that brought good into this place. So, Lord, we thank you for your history with each of us in terms of prospering our lives to the point that we are now. And Father, I pray that you continue to aim our eyes toward you and not at the prosperity itself, but aim our eyes at you as the God who gives great gifts, Lord. We don't want to be distracted by the gifts themselves, the prosperity itself. We want to be amazed and enthralled by the giver himself. And we can trust that all these things will be provided after us. Seek first your kingdom and your righteousness, and all these things will be added. They will. So thank you, Father, for your great and intimate love for us, your ready presence to us, your promise of goodness in our lives that come from you. Pointed out, we pray, as these weeks go on, in Jesus' name. Amen.